Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for inviting me to do this keynote. Water and I have had a strange and complicated and wondrous relationship all my life. Before I get into that, I would like for all of us to close our eyes and take a few breaths. Focus on your breath coming in through your nostrils, filling your lungs, oxygenating your body, and cycling out through your nostrils again as carbon dioxide. Now, as you count your breaths, take your first breath in and thank the trees and the plants on land for that fresh breath of oxygen. Now, when you take your second breath in, thank the oceans. Every second breath every human being on this planet takes, no matter where they are, comes from the ocean, because the ocean produces close to 70% of our oxygen. For this, we can thank the phytoplankton in the ocean, that small green algae and other algae like kelp. You can thank them for that life-giving inhale of oxygen. The lungs of the planet, therefore, are not the Amazon, but it is the oceans. And life as we know it, all life as we know it, depends on water. As Dr. Sylvia Earle, the famous marine biologist, once said, without blue, there is no green. Is there a culture, a tradition, a lineage, a community, a group of people who don't come from a reverence for water? I have a small prayer from my culture, Hinduism. Apohista mayo bhuvastha na urje dadatana mahe ranaya chakshasahe. It means, O water, because of your presence, the atmosphere is so refreshing and it imparts us with vigor and strength. We revere you who is great and who gladdens us with your pure essence. Mythology in Hinduism also sees the oceans as the realms of the gods, and humans are prohibited from entering it. In my adopted country in South Africa, it is believed that the oceans are a resting place for ancestors, and one needs to perform rituals and prayers and have deep respect before they can either go into the water or extract from it. Coming back to my relationship with water, it started as one of fear. When I was a child, I had a pretty bad near-drowning incident, and this made me so scared of water that I never learned to swim, nor did I ever approach it for a long time. So I reached adulthood without learning that very important skill of swimming. I loved being on the beach. I loved watching the dance of waves, but I was very frustrated that this fear held me back from ever enjoying the ocean. And then, in some great cosmic irony, I met a partner in 2006, Craig Foster, who pretty much lives in the water. I think he only visits land from time to time. After I moved to Cape Town, I was surrounded by people who lived in the water, amphibious souls, who would plead and entreat with me to join them in the water, and I would find that I just couldn't most of the time. They would come back with photographs and footage of what they had seen, incredible photographs and footage, and this would fill me with great FOMO, and I would feel so frustrated with myself that I couldn't go in the water and experience what they were experiencing. I had spent the previous decades working as an environment journalist and spent nearly all of my time in remote natural spaces reporting and telling stories about our wondrous terrestrial biodiversity and challenges of conservation. I had never had a happier place than being out in nature, from when I was a child and taken out for my first walk in the woods. And it always was a source of great despair and confusion when I just couldn't access the oceans or feel about the oceans the same way that I felt about nature on land. With a lot of coaxing, I would occasionally go in the water at low tide, in places where I could stand if I panicked. I would have a wetsuit on. I would have I would be wearing a life jacket, and the water would have to be very calm, very shallow. The kelp certainly helped, as kelp types act like flotation devices, especially at low tide. You could literally hold on to them or just lie on top of them like they were like this floating rafts. The water was also freezing, and my Indian skin was used to warm tropical climates. And in summer, when it's 20 degrees here in the water, everybody finds it warm, and even that was too cold for me. So perhaps considering this thing with the cold water, I was with Craig, who persuaded me to enter the shallows clad in a wetsuit and life jacket. But unfortunately, my first foray was into very cold water. The temperature was 51 degrees Fahrenheit or 11 degrees Celsius. I was in a wetsuit and a life jacket and a hoodie, and the resulting brain freeze and numb hands I thought would last a lifetime. So in hindsight, perhaps not the best time to have made my first sort of entry into the water, except for something magical. In the shallows, while trying to stay afloat and clinging to Craig and trying not to succumb to a full-blown panic attack, a dark, sleek shape swam under me. This shape was followed by two more, and they circled back. In that moment, I forgot to be scared, I forgot to hold on to Craig, and forgot that I was scared of water. And for the first time, I noticed the shafts of light coming through the kelp fronds and illuminating this grey, beautiful shape. It was 3 gully sharks. These were the very first sharks I saw. At 2 meters long with grey bodies with spots on them, these are beautiful, sleek sharks that love to swim through the shallows and cruise through the kelp. It was my first glimpse of them in the sea forest, and my first glimpse of the sea forest. These sharks are also very shy and spook at the slightest sort of harsh movement. And clearly my ungainly thrashing in the water freaked them out, and they very quickly vanished. And the minute they left, all the cold, the fear, the water, all of it rushed back into my head, and I panicked, and I got out of the water nearly as fast as the sharks had vanished. But unknown to me, a spark had been lit. After that, the few times I would go in the water, in the shallows, still in my wetsuit and life jacket, and as long as the persuasion and the entreaties and the pleading were enticing enough to get me into the water, I would always see gully sharks. And then, all those times, instead of dashing away like they did that first time, they would actually slightly swim up to where I was, kind of give me a pass by, almost like they were looking at me. It wasn't very far for them to swim up because this was in low tide and shallow, so it was not at all that high for them to come to the surface where I was. In those moments, every single time, my fear would just vanish, and I would forget I was scared of the water, and I would just be filled with a sense of wonder. Imagine some shark ancestor was actually older than trees. They're older than the rings of Saturn. Rings of Saturn are only about 100 million years old, sharks nearly 400 million years old. And right now, the oldest living creature on Earth that's been recorded is the Greenland shark, 350 years old. I mean, if that's not a miracle, what is? And each time I would feel a little bit more of that pull in the water. From when I was a child, I was obsessed with animals. It didn't matter what kind. They fascinated me and filled me with joy. A butterfly flashing through the bushes, a bat winging through at dusk, the iridescent scales of a snake, the high keening cry of a Brahmini kite as it swooped and dove in the water, in the waves of the ocean, the haunting call of a jackal. All of these sounds, all of these sights, being in the woods, this is where I had always found my joy, always found my wonder. And so there I was feeling a deep imposter syndrome, because how could I hope to be an advocate for the ocean if I couldn't access it in the way I needed to be an authentic voice for her stories? I had never in all my years as an environment journalist phoned a story in. I had always immersed myself in the landscapes. I had always immersed myself in the issues, seen the animal, been with the species before I ever wrote a story on it. And then something happened that changed everything for me. It was a winter day a few years ago, and I just joined Sea Change Project, an ocean conservation not-for-profit that was started by my husband, Craig Foster. We had just started working on my octopus teacher, and just watching the footage, I remember thinking to myself, I have to get over this fear and I have to learn to be in the water. At that time, we got a message, a call, saying that a dead whale had been spotted and the whale had died because it had entangled itself in octopus fishing traps, and that the city was sending out a retrieval team, and one of us was welcome to join them. I immediately rushed out with them. And it was a horrible sight. It was terrible to see this great, beautiful animal dead in the water, an air-breathing mammal that lives in the ocean, drowned because it couldn't come up for air when the ropes had entangled it. A few days later, we got a call about another dead whale. This time it was a juvenile humpback whale. The previous whale was a Brutus whale. And when I was on the boat taking photographs of this animal being dragged out of the water onto the slipway, I felt the deep irony of the fact that that slipway it was hoisted on used to be the site of an old whaling station where hundreds of southern right whales had been slaughtered, along with several other whales. South Africa took the exemplary decision to halt whaling in 1979, but it felt like an echo of those times to see this. My articles went out in all of the major publications, and along with other groups who had protested, we managed to get the attention of the Environment Minister. She then decreed that all of these octopus fishing traps had to be pulled out of the water until they could be modified and certified as whale friendly. This felt like a huge win, and we did save a lot of whale lives that season. A few days after that order had come through, while I was bumbling in the shallows as usual, a juvenile humpback swam through the kelp forest in the shallows and came close enough for me to touch. A few days later, a southern right juvenile did the same. It's hard to describe what it feels like to see these massive animals in the water. Overwhelming does not begin to describe it, and I felt a shift in my being. I will not stretch incredulity by saying that they came specifically through as a sign, but I decided I would take it as a sign. I have certainly not seen them since, so it's not something that happens regularly. They probably came in to feed on something that was there, but I have not seen them since do that, and I've never experienced it again, so I certainly took that for a sign. I felt like the ocean was calling, that the sea forest was calling, and I had to answer. I believe absolutely that there is a deep and ancient sentience embedded in nature, what we at Sea Change think of as the forest mind when we are in the water in the great African sea forest. And that intelligence seemed to be opening up a portal for me to come through. In Hinduism, we believe that all beings, human and non-human, are imbued with the soul, the Atman, that we are all interconnected by this essence and are expressions of the greater universal consciousness. I don't know if I'd internalized this thought in a deep way, but on that day, it absolutely crystallized for me. For years during my time as a reporter across India, I had had really good fortune and spent time with our tribal people, and their worldview had so changed who I was as a person when I first started out. When I started out as a journalist, when I went into the wild, I only acknowledged it as a wild space if it was, pristine, as in no people there at all whatsoever, no human presence. And that changed to me understanding from the tribal point of view that people are so much a part of the wild, that we are the human animal, and that we have a right to be in these wild spaces as much as any non-human animal does. And this was a profound shift in how I viewed nature after that. Our tribal people and other indigenous groups over the years also taught me how deeply important revering nature is. When we revere nature, we see her as a whole living being. To some people, she is Gaia. To others, she's a mother. To some, an intrinsic part of their being. The reverence allowed us to keep our presence minimal and live in reciprocity, in true design as the human animal. Even as times changed, it allowed us to not want to destroy that which we instinctively understood as our home. When reverence drops away, then we suddenly see the world, as the First Nations elder so clearly put it. We stop seeing her as the source of all life to simply a resource from which we can extract. Everything then boils down to, we will save that which we will deem useful and remove that which is not. Even our language and all of our conservation language became transactional. So basically, what did we start doing? It's like, save a tree because it gives you oxygen. Save the oceans as our livelihoods depend upon it. Save a river because it gives you fresh water. Clear forests for land, even if animals lose their home, because, we need some project to go up there. And first, it was like, it's only animals. And that very quickly translated into, we're just moving a few people. So let's displace the communities who've lived there for generations, because people in the city need energy when we have to dig for coal somewhere. When we have no respect for an old growth tree that is 200 years old and has withstood time and storms and changes, and we just chop it down for charcoal or coal, how will we have any respect for each other? In the system of consumerism and infinite growth that we have created and touted as the path to all happiness, how did we not understand and incorporate the diamond water complex? Postulated by the economist Adam Smith, the conundrum exists in that while water is essential for all life on earth, a diamond is not. But pound for pound, a diamond is 10 times or more the price of water. So what does that mean? So we decided price had more value than intrinsic value. Basically, we live in a world where what we value is actually just a price, and what we don't treat with care holds real value. This then also led to the patriarchal notion that women's work doesn't hold value. A woman looking after her home, a family, the elderly, a community that work does not hold the same value as a person who could produce something that can be bought by someone else or marketplace. Over a decade ago, I was up in the Himalayas in India in the state of Himachal Pradesh. I was there to do a story on fresh water and stress and about the stress over the accessibility of this fresh water. The Bias River has a dam, and there are hydroelectrical power projects on it to get water and to get electricity to towns and cities, and even to a city as far as Delhi, hundreds of kilometers away from where this dam and this river is. And yet, there were local villages, barely a few miles away, that didn't even have pipes or taps in their homes where they could access the water. They still had to trek those mountainous paths to get to the river, to fill buckets and pots with water and carry it back all the way again to their homes. And of course, most of this work was done by women. And more horrifying, household after household, little girls were not going to school because they were helping their mother collect water. I mean, what a reason to not get an education, simply because they had to go collect water. These homes didn't even have taps or pipes that brought them water. The villages had also moved away from being closer to the river, as the dam and the Hydel project had firstly flooded a lot of the land, so they were displaced, and then they were prone to flooding in the monsoon or during the winter because of climate vagaries, and so these villages had moved away. So now they were further from the river and had to walk further to get the water. Meanwhile, on my return to Delhi, I found rich homes throwing rain parties in the summer, where outrageous amounts of water are brought in by water tankers and set up with artificial sprinklers, and it rains down on the party goers as they dance. It was a wake-up call to iniquity like no other, this utter lack of reverence or responsibility like no other. I mean, wasting all that water in Delhi's scorching summer. One group of people deemed not important enough, even though they live near the river, to even have a tap in their houses, and another group important enough that they can waste water in any which way that they wanted to. In my adopted home of South Africa, the legacy of apartheid removed swathes of people from their homes and banned them from accessing the beaches, cutting them off from centuries-old traditions, cultural beliefs, ways of life, severing a very sacred thread to the heart of their ancestors. Even today, these wounds are open with slow healing. After the encounter with the two whales, the shift within me, begun by the gully sharks, became profound, and I learned to work to turn my fear to wonder actively. And to do that, I went back to my deep place of reverence and joy and freedom. Because that is what nature immersion brings to us, a sense of belonging, a sense of freedom, and most importantly, a sense of kinship, not just with the humans around us, but with also our non-human kin. Finding this wonder and holding it, I believe, is the way forward in this complicated world that we have built, a world where iniquity and inequality and the suffering of our non-humans and fellow humans have reached new depths. These spaces, these feelings, this reverence needs a reclaiming. It needs for all of us to come together in story and share our experiences in nature. Today, I can be in that 11 degrees Celsius water without a wetsuit. I can swim and dive every day. My ocean tribe is growing, and I want the waters of my adopted country to become a rainbow ocean with everyone having access to it. Now it's not just the sharks and the whales and the rays and the other big animals that I encounter, but the little ones, cryptically hidden under rocks, sleeping in the crevices, feeding in the shadows and sheltering in the fronds of the kelp. The limpets, the anemones, the nudibranchs, the crabs, the whelks, the amphipods and the little shrimp. hundreds of thousands of others, and the wondrous sea squirt, with whom we share 80% of our DNA. Ruby red, bulbous, and often tucked out of sight, redbait is a type of sea squirt. In its adult life, it is sessile, fixed in place. Literally looks like a plant, but it's an animal. But it starts out life like a tadpole-like swimming creature. It even has an axis and a spinal cord. And it's only later that does it fix itself onto a rock or a substrate and then, become an adult. And when it does that, it loses that spinal cord. So these animals are filter feeders. That's how they survive. And when they were genome sequenced, it was found that we share 80% of our DNA with them. Once that door of connection and realization opens, there is no going back. How can we not realize how deeply we belong, how magic this is our home? And what makes it home is that all of us are here together. And just like any family, it is up to us to make it or break it. Things are challenging right now, but we are not without power. The first power we have is the power of choice. We can choose love first, always. We also have 3 other very powerful weapons. We have our wallets, our votes, and our voices. We can make the right choices, vote for people who care, and raise our voices for not just each other, but for all of our non-human kin. So I would like to end this keynote once more with breathing, and this time, close your eyes and give thanks to our common ancestors, the Sacrohytus, that ancient ancestor of the sea, from whence many strains of animal species came forth, slowly to walk on land, including us, where our tears and blood and sweat all still carry salt, where our bodies are still 70% water, where our life begins still in liquid enclosed in the womb. It is why at Sea Change Project our tagline is, remember you are wild, and why in our organization we are grounded in science, guided by indigenous wisdom, and inspired by nature. For us, deep nature connection is at the heart of all the healing in the world, when after a long journey, I too learned to free my amphibious soul.
They are fleeting ghosts in the mist forest, teasing us with fragments of their time. Then our brothers and sisters, let us swim beside them, and we feel filled up by their ancient presence. Sharks are older than trees by 100 million years. 200 million years older than dinosaurs. And they've survived 4 mass extinctions. They are travelers from the mists of deep time. Now they feel more like great-great-grandmothers, great-grandfathers, warming our hearts in the cold forest. Being with them is like looking in an old, faded mirror and seeing a reflection of what we once were, fully wild too. As a species, what we seem to have forgotten is that biodiversity, the sheer number of animals and plants on this planet, is our mother of all mothers. She is the source that drives everything we do. Every mouthful of food, every breath of air is coming from the complexity of nature that is making that oxygen. Over 60% from the ocean phytoplankton, the rest from land plants and trees. She is feeding all life on Earth. She is the source of all sources. And she has been here for us Homo sapiens for 300,000 years. She's cared for us from our beginnings. She's woven into our ancestral memory. For 97% of our time as humans, we've been aware of her. Many of us have worshipped her. All have respected her. We've made connections and threads to her deep source, the essence of all life, the pulsing heart of Mother Nature. The land and the sea forests, as well as the moon, the sun, the cosmos, and gravity, are all part of this magnificent architecture of life, our shared life support system. And in this last 3% of our time on Earth, we've suddenly severed those extraordinary threads to the Great Mother. And we've somehow in the madness thought we could live independent of nature, forgetting that our bodies, our minds, our beings are nature itself. There's no separation. We were woven into that biological intelligence right from the beginning. We're a product of 14 billion years of this mother, of this birthing. We're literally stardust that's turned into these highly sophisticated primates. But we cannot divorce ourselves from the source. That will be our undoing and has been our undoing. Our vision at Sea Change is really to start to repair those threads back to the source and encourage and facilitate people's reconnection to nature, to the Great Mother, so that we can start to build back and reimagine the biodiversity for which this planet was designed. I kayaked out with my wife Swati to a granite boulder in the middle of the ocean. She spontaneously started to dance, mimicking the kelp forest and the water that swirled around us. I felt a deep love for her and for the great sea forest that feeds our mind every day. In her movements, I sensed the unity between human and water, an ancient pact that stretches back 5,000 generations on this African coast, a pact that early humans kept with the wild, and something we now realize is the most precious thing we will ever have. We bow down before the God of wild, before Mother Nature incarnate, completely at her mercy, and cradled from the first human murmur. She is the blood in our veins. She is our beating heart. She is our moving hands and arms. If we defile her, we defile our most sacred heritage. If we feed her, we feed our hominid soul.